So welcome to the ALBA webinar on gender issues in East and Southeast Asia. My name is Hailan. I'm a professor of neuroscience at Zhejiang University at Hangzhou, China. I am delighted to welcome you to this webinar event. So first, I'd like to thank you all for joining us today, and also I'd like to thank the ALBA team for putting together this wonderful program. We have a really exciting panel ahead of us. So before we start, as an ALBA advisor, I'd like to briefly introduce the ALBA network and its mission. So the name ALBA means sunrise in several languages, including Spanish and Italian. And with these poetic words representing the beginning of a new day, the founders of ALBA wish to recognize that our scientific communities are beginning to acknowledge the importance of incorporating diversity and ensuring equity in the way we deal with science. And ALBA is devoted to catalyze this movement in brain science. So ALBA was created by a group of leading scientists with the aim to promote equity and diversity in the brain sciences. So on the one hand, despite of growing interest in diversity-related issues, inequalities do still exist and persist. So factors such as sex, gender, sexual orientation, disability, age, socioeconomic status, ethnicity, race, nationality, religion, or culture. So this could all become a source of bias or injustice to exclude talented scientists from opportunities. On the other hand, ALBA believes that the excellence of science is rooted in diversity of science, and the diversity of science comes from diversity of scientists. So therefore, the mission of ALBA is to create and to build a global network in order to share best practices to counteract bias, to recognize outstanding contributions to science and diversity, to provide networking and mentoring opportunities, especially to members of underrepresented groups, to support their career development. So to achieve this goal, ALBA has launched various forms of activities. So firstly, we would like to formulate our voice and to make our voice heard. So ALBA has declared the best practices that we believe in. Through this networking events on diversity-related issues, we hope to keep discussing policies, updating policies, and hoping to reach a common grounds. And these common grounds and best practices will then be advocated to policymakers, funding agencies, and institutions. And secondly, we would like to collect data. So this will include not only data of scientists, so these are stakeholders, also data on the problems scientists face as reflected on incidents of bias and underrepresentation, as well as data on solutions. What are the effective strategies to overcome this bias? And finally, we would like to promote these best practices by highlighting success stories, by giving awards and creating a mentoring community. So this is the current version of the ALBA Declaration on Equity and Inclusion. So the aim is to raise awareness and to provide a concrete set of actions that individuals and organizations can take to promote equity and inclusivity. So the declaration has two main focus. One is on recognizing and overcoming implicit bias. And the second is about creating a healthy workplace culture and environment. So since the initial launch of the declaration in January in SFN, in the SFN online meeting, it has been endorsed by a rapidly growing number of international organizations. So these are the funding and supporting partners of ALBA. And we are also collaborating with many international organizations, including Women in Neuroscience, Black in Neuro, Bias Watch India, and many other organizations. So please do get involved. So you can register through this website. You can also sign the declaration to show support or host an ALBA event like the one we have today, or becoming a member and share your own stories and successful experience. And we can be followed on this social media. So for today's webinar, we'll be talking about diversity issues in East and Southeast Asia from a gender perspective. Also, the way we set it up is that each panelist will be talking for about 10 minutes, presenting on a topic related to gender diversity, their personal stories, and how they approach it in their research or in their institution. And we will have time in the end for Q&A, and we're really interested in hearing what the audience thinks. So you can, so please use the Q&A function in the Zoom, and you can even type in the question during the panelist presentation. So with that, I will now turn to give the floor to my co-chairs, Dr. Jacque and Dipesh Chaudhury, who are going to introduce our panelists and moderate the discussions.
Thanks, Hailan. Hello, everyone. I'm Jacque. I'm the co-chair today. Let me introduce the first speaker. Our first speaker is Dr. Yukiko Goda. She's the team leader of the Synaptic Plasticity and Connectivity Lab at Riken Center for Brain Science in Japan. Please welcome Yukiko.
I would like to thank the organizers for including me in this very special and exciting session. So in my bit, what I would like to do is very briefly mention my background so that you could understand where my thoughts are coming from. And then I would like to focus on these three issues amongst many, many issues on gender, and specifically about representation of women in conferences as speakers and in committees, particularly in decision-making bodies, and finally, representation of women as faculty members, and then mention some thoughts about possible solutions. So first of all, a bit about my background. I received my scientific training in North America, in Canada, and then in the USA, and for my PhD and postdoc. And then I had my first PI position as an assistant professor in the US for 4 years. And then I relocated to the UK, where I spent about 10 years in London at UCL. And then I've been back in Japan for about 10 years at Riken. And so my view on Japan, I've spent many of my life, about 2/3 of my life abroad. And so my views on Japan comes partly as a Japanese person, but also I think I have a strong component as from a foreign vantage point. So it's a mixed view. Okay, so jumping right into some of the issues. So first about conferences and conferences and speaker list. There's still, I think, some problems that's remaining. I think in Japan, I've seen a tremendous improvement over the past 10 years or so, but there's still quite often, especially at local meetings and smaller meetings, that there's only male-only speaker list and very few women. And I think it's important to have female women speakers from an audience point of view because you want to feel part of the the conference and maybe have some role models, but also as a speaker to be part of the list. I think it's a really nice opportunity to present your work and as to be recognized. So it's important to have women speakers from both points of view. And as I mentioned, so there's still some ways to go in Japan. And recently I was on program committee, and there are two women and there are many men, and we're suggesting names, and the men kept suggesting male scientists. But after a while, I raised my voice, and that perhaps if there's somebody just equally interesting, that you might consider a woman scientist. And several years ago, I think I would have felt uncomfortable raising my voice under such conditions. And I mean, having aged, getting older helps. But also, I think there is a climate. I think there is a shift in the general appreciation that of the of the gender disparity, that we have to normalize this disparity. So there is a nice move in terms of the one of the big organization in brain science, the Japan Neuroscience Society. There's about 5,500 members at the moment, and there's an annual society meeting that takes place with about 3,000 participants or so. At the moment, because of COVID, it's a little bit of um, things have moved to online situation, but normally if there's about 3,000 participants, and there's no quotas for symposium speakers. And I've consulted before this webinar. I've consulted Dr. Ayako Watabe. She is the chair of the diversity committee, and she's mentioned that there has been active discussions about having a numerical goal in terms of you women speakers and so forth. And there's always been some divided opinions that perhaps having a quota might be construed as giving unfair advantage to women. And there's some opinions from both, I think, men and women, and not everyone, but there. So thus far, um, there has not been any specific quotas. However, 30% of the society members are women, and so the society makes a point about really pushing for having at least 30% representation in symposium proposals to have women speakers. And if you have women speakers, you're much more likely to be selected, put it this way. But having served on the program committee for a number of years, you still see applications without any female speakers. But things are getting improving. And in general, I think there are many even more women symposium organizers, and also in society in general, there are many more women represented in their committees. So this brings to my second point about committees. At RECAN, I'm involved in several committees and duties, and again, here too, I think there's increasing recognition that one needs to include at least some number of women in the committee. And this is also outside of RECAN as well, in some granting organizations as well. Um, However, there are some caveats in that, we're still few in number, and there's not enough women faculty, and so quite often there'd be the same people represented in, different committees, and so it sets a higher workload for women. I think that's a bit of a disadvantage on top of general disadvantage. And also another caveat is that in decision-making committees, there's still very few women represented. And I think this raises issues. And particularly, I just said that there's not enough women faculty, but like in hiring committee, um, so we really need to increase the representation of women and hire more women faculty members. So this is my third point. And at RECAN, there's again recognition that we really need to increase women faculty members. And there has been some initiative. And since 2018, for example, the Sechi Kato program. So this is initiative to attract exceptionally talented young female PIs. It's a recruitment effort, and it's coming along quite well. And also, RECAN has a female PI incentive fund program, which is an additional support for research funding for newly appointed female um, independent researchers. So there are some initiatives, but perhaps there is still not enough. Um, yeah, and so before I mention some possible ways to tackle these issues in Japan, I'd like to give sort of like the general problem. It's at the societal level, and here's the World Economic Forum publishes global gender report, and this is taken from 2020 report. Out of 153 countries, Japan ranked 121st. This is way at the bottom of developed countries, and I think it's at the bottom of all the countries represented today in the webinar. And the score, so the score, the parity, if there's an equal representation of male and females, then it's 1. So the lower the score, the lower the higher the disparity, and the score is 0.652. But if you look at how that's distributed, and so there's many factors that's included in this in computing the score, and Japan does quite well in terms of educational attainment, educational opportunities and achievements. There's equal opportunities for men and women, close to parity of 1. Also, health and survival, it's quite good. But when it comes to political empowerment, this is representation of women in politics and decision making. It's very, very low. Also, in economic participation opportunity, it's quite low. So it's this within this framework. And then there's all the science and academia, but there's this overall societal views. But recently, there's been some seismic change that I felt. And this is thanks to this guy, Yoshiro Mori. He's an old-time politician, and he was the head of the Tokyo Olympics organizing committee. And so this mishap, I think, was publicized quite broadly. So what he mentioned that women in board meetings, so he doesn't like having too many women in board meetings because they tend to speak too long and they take up too much time. And you know, um, and then this just caught on everybody's attention, media attention, and then in the end he ended up resigning. But I think thanks to his remark, ghastly as it may seem, although I think many of women, we know these things happen all the time in a way, but I think this made everybody aware of the issues that Japanese society is facing. And there's been lots of talks everywhere, and even in our institution, in our committees, and just chats. And so I think this was in a way good thing. And so coming back to this framework, so we really have our major obstacle. I think our biggest obstacle is the societal views on women in general, and in a very male-dominant culture. and quite often women are objectified in media. We're expected to restrain themselves from speaking out, and we're discouraged from acting too boyish in a way. But things are changing slowly but surely. It's changing, and we really have to work hard to increase the awareness amongst our male colleagues. And then I really am in favor of introducing quotas. I mentioned earlier that there are some concerns and divided opinions, even amongst women and men, I think equally, in the sense that introducing quotas might um, be, you know, really some women may not be preferred to have given such or been construed as having an unfair advantage. But I think that you have to start from somewhere, and in conferences or committees especially use, if you're the only woman in a committee, even though committee might have women represented, if you're the only one, it's really difficult to voice your opinion. It's said that you need at least 3 people to have some sort of a collective effect. And for faculty members, it's difficult, but um, you have to have different sorts of incentives to promote. And finally, just the last little bit. So this is to advertise what I mentioned about the weekends program to promote the female junior PI. So those in the audience, if you're interested, have a look at this. The call is open at the moment. And so with that, thank you for your attention.
Hey, thank you, Professor Goda, for an interesting talk. It's interesting to see the differences in parity for political power and education. Okay, so yeah, thank you very much, Professor Goda. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our second speaker, and she is Professor Seung-Hee Lee. She's an associate professor at the Sensory Processing Lab at the Korea Advanced Institute of Science and Technology. So yes, please welcome Professor Lee. Please, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for the organizer for inviting me to this interesting ALBA network and as a speaker. And I'm an associate professor at KAIST, Korean Advanced Institute of Science and Technology. I belong to the Department of Biological Sciences. And let me introduce myself briefly. I got my bachelor's degree from the Seoul National University. It's in Korea, in Seoul. And after that, I entered the graduate school in the Seoul National University. So I got my PhD there in the same university. So during this training period, I had the chance to visit New York University as a visiting researcher for 1 year. And that experience actually encouraged me a lot to become the neuroscientist, continue my career in the neuroscience field. After getting the PhD, I moved to the University of California, Berkeley at US as a postdoc. I worked as a postdoc there for 5 years, 4 years and a half, and I returned to Korea, becoming an assistant professor at KAIST. And during my professorship, I had a chance to visit Switzerland, EPFL, for 6 months as a visiting researcher. And there I also can experience the neuroscience program in the Switzerland, which was very interesting. And I can compare the system between the US and the Europe and the Korea. So as we know, let me move on to the next one. So in the world, there are various languages, and we know that there are various countries and systems, and that causes the diversity in different regions. And Korea is a small country located here, and we are also, we have been developed a lot, but still the system is still not fully developed like the US and the Europe. And our system for supporting the science program is rapidly grown recently, but still there are many things that we have to consider, especially when we consider diversity of the gender and also all these populations in Korea. So I finished my postdoc research at UC Berkeley in the US, and I started my job at KAIST on 2013 September. Before starting my career as a professor at KAIST, I didn't feel any unfairness or any discouraged because of my gender before starting my professorship at KAIST. So before when I did my postdoctoral research, the PI there was the woman scientist, and I could learn a lot from her, and I didn't feel any discouragement because of my gender. But when I started my job at KAIST, all the system in Korea was really supporting the male scientists better than the female scientists, and I had struggled to get my own independent grant as a female faculty. So I applied all kinds of grant system in Korea. I couldn't get anything for 1 year, more than 1 year. And after 1 year, the first independent grant that I can get as a female faculty was a small list one in Korea. It was supporting about 43,000 US dollars per year, and it's supporting only 2.8 years in Korea. It's a small grant, the smallest grant in Korea, but that was the only thing that I can get at the time. So I was so, but when I see my colleagues in the department, male colleagues mostly, because I was hired like 8 years ago now. But so far, all the faculty members joined to our department were males colleagues, and they had no troubles in getting the grant in the first year. So they got also the larger amount of money from the government, and that gave me so much struggle. And why that happens, I could understand, but I was complained a lot actually when I was an assistant professor, and I worked harder than other male colleagues to get the grants and also to publish papers in Korea. So while I was struggling, recently South Korea realized that there is a gender bias in supporting the grant in Korea. So they calculated the number of faculty members in Korea, and they reported this on 2018. And when the chief of the Korean National Research Foundation became the chief was the woman at the time, and newly hired the chief of NRF was the woman, and she initiated this research, and she reported these results in the NRF. And the results was quite shocking at the time. I didn't have that detailed information before, but this report was very interesting, and I realized that why I had so much struggle in the field, in Korean academic field. So the number of, first, the bias in hiring the female faculties in Korea was observed in the number of faculty members. Total number of female faculties in Korea is about 20% in 2013. And it was slightly increasing, and now it's about 23% on 2017. And actually now the Korean government made a law to have at least 25% of female faculty in every university. So now it's getting tried to promote hiring the female faculties in Korea. And also the ratio of female faculty in age group is higher. The female faculty ratio is higher in the under 30 group, which is recently hired in the university. In the older days, like over 60s, the number of female faculty is much less, like 13% total. So indicating that previously, so far, it was the male-dominant society, Korean academic field, but now they realize this problem, the gender equality problem, and they try to hire more female faculties, and now it's increasing in the population of the female faculties in Korea. And this number of female faculties in 2017 is higher in the natural science field in Korea, but it is much less in the engineering field. The same for the students number as well. There are less female students in the engineering field compared to natural sciences. And the number of female faculties also is very low in the engineering field. And the problem of grant received from the government, so the number of grants received from the government was calculated in 2017. And still, even though the ratio of the faculties are 75 to 25%, the number of grants received by the female faculty is less than that in the natural science field, about half of that, and also it was less in the engineering field, indicating that it is harder for the female faculty to get the grant from the government. And more shocking is that the size of the grant that is received by the male and female faculties, and researchers funded over 1 billion Korean won. So now Korean government support lots of money for the science and engineering research. And there is a big grant supporting over 1 billion Korean won per year. And in 2017, number of male faculty who receives the grant over 1 billion Korean won is about 541 researchers, but only 28 researchers, female researchers receive that big grants from the government. So the ratio of the big grant support for male and female faculties in the STEM field is really biased toward the male, and male faculties have less problem in getting the big grant compared to female faculties. And at the time, 2018, I was younger than 39 years old, and actually the NRF reported that the researchers younger than 39 years old funded over 500 million Korean won in 2017. So there were big grants for supporting the young starting assistant professors, but there were only one female faculty compared to 29 male faculties who received this big grant as an assistant professor. These results were really shocking to me, and actually I realized that why I was struggling in getting the grants. That was because I'm a female faculty in Korea. But more important thing is that the publication, how much publication all these faculty members, female and female faculties make from the academic research based on this grant support. And the calculation was very interesting. If for the publication in the top 20% journals in the SCI per faculty was even higher in the female faculties compared to the male faculties, indicating that the amount of the grant is smaller for the female faculty, but the publication record was higher in the female faculty members. So the bias of the grant support from the government was not due to the ability of the research, but because of the gender. So this result was clearly showing that in Korea there is a gender inequality, right, in supporting the grants for male and female faculties in the academic field, especially in the STEM field in Korea. So from these results, I was very struggled, and also I wanted. So now it is good that the Korean National Research Foundation realized this issue and reported this research and tried to support more female faculties to get enough funding. But still I can see the bias yet because all these reviewers for the big grants are mostly male, and their evaluation is more favoring the male applicants than the female faculties. So I think we have to consider this a lot, especially if you have more money, then you can have better efficient way of doing the research. But the female faculties are struggling to get the money from the government and also to manage their research and maintain their research career at the same level as the male faculty. And I think that has to be still solved in Korean academic field, especially in the STEM field in Korea. And that is key for us to solve when we think about the diverse in gender in the neuroscience field. So I think that's my suggestion and the considerable issues that we have to think, especially in Korea.
Thank you, Professor Lee, for sharing the perspective from Korea. The figures are shocking and concerning. I think we can discuss more during the Q&A session. Now, please let me introduce our next speaker, Dr. Xiaohong Xu from the Chinese Academy of Sciences in China.
Hello everyone, I'm Xiaohong Xu from Institute of Neuroscience based, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's a great pleasure to be here to share with you some of my perspective in female scientists in China. So I don't have PPT, I'm going to just talk to you like this. So I was born and raised in China, and after graduating, I went to college in Beijing. So after college graduation, I went to the United States and did my PhD and postdoc training for over a 12 years period of time. So both of my PhD and postdoc mentors are actually male. So as you can see that I actually never really thought much about being a female, or that being a female might be a problem for me on my career. Partly maybe because I did so well academically growing up, so I never thought it would be a problem. So I came back October 2012 to establish my own laboratory in Shanghai. And then shortly after that, I got married and had my son, my only child. And then things started to really change. So I stopped being able to work really late in the lab for as much as I wanted as my male fellow scientists. I had to go back home and take care of my kid. And I essentially stopped traveling. I think Dr. Goda and Dr. Lee talk about not being invited onto meetings. And for me, it was like almost like I self-discipline. I could not go because I had to stay home, take care of the baby, because no one else would be able to do it for me. So for almost 2 or 3 years, I essentially stopped all the meetings and all the traveling. And then, my son now is 7 years old. Still taking care of him take away a lot of my time. That time I would like to spend either, writing manuscript or grant or talking to my students. So it's just the even as it is today, I'm still worried about him just coming and photobomb this talk right now, because I had to rearrange a lot of his activities just to be here to talk with you. So traditionally, Chinese women are not allowed to go to work, so they stay home and take care of their child. And that changed dramatically in the 1949 after the founding of the new the People's Republic of China, where women are encouraged to go to work. So we are called ourselves proudly the half of the sky. So the labor participant in China was actually pretty high for women, almost as the same as male. Yet what that meant for women is that in addition to work, they have to go home and do all the household chore and take care of the baby. So what that meant that even though we have almost equal participation, women are tend to stuck in the lower rank of all the jobs they actually are doing. So back to the brain sciences, what we see that in my laboratory, I have almost more amount of students going in to get their PhD degree training in brain science. Yet more and more of them are dropping out along the way. And, so get to the faculty level, like where I am right now, there are about 25% of female faculty in our institute, and the number has been steadily increasing, but it's far from 50%. So why are women dropping out? Because they had to choose, because this lack of societal support of childcare. And so they had to choose between either taking care of the family or, career growth. And apparently this is about the same across the globe. It seems maybe more in countries like China, where there's not standardized or child care system, the disparity appears to be more. So I think this is really the foundation of the gender disparity or inequality. And a vivid example of this is that during the COVID-19, there are reports that the female the paper submission by the female last author actually dropped because female scientists are stuck home to take care of the child, which now have no school to go to. So I think one way to bring gender equality would to establish a support for female who go on to their career, and that's the same for brain sciences. And related to this, because there's less female progress in their career, and less female occupy higher positions, so I feel like that as a female faculty, I get questioned more by my students. It seemed like every single word from my either suggestion get a lot more argument. Initially, I thought this just might be me being sensitive, and I feel like I get argument more than my male counterpart. Until one day I came to this TED talk by Paula Stone-Williams. So he used to be a male, but then he transgendered to be Paula, to be this, and she had a TED talk called "Because I lived as a man and a woman, and here is what I found out." And I really encourage everyone to go there and to really watch this video. It just says that because of the societal has a different perception of male and women, male and men and women, that after her gender switch, and she's get questioned a lot more. So so after realize that, I feel like I have to step my foot, first when I talk to be more firm when I talk to my students or not. So so where does that leave us after realizing all that? So here's what I want. So for fellow female scientists who are younger, I want you to be prepared. So to know that you will face different challenges. It's a set of very different challenges going forward with your career. And it's better to start planning early, to really think about when to have a baby, when to get married, who are going to take care of it, and to really get support, as much support as you can by talking to other female scientists or getting institutional support. And I think and people won't tell you during those scientific training, so you should be aware of that, to be aware of the challenge. The sooner you prepare for it, the better it is. For my male scientist, really what I really want to do is just for you to acknowledge the fact that it's not a leveled playground. I know it's not your fault that the system is favoring you. And you might not even realize how much favor you're getting without looking at the numbers. So a lot of time I get upset when I complain to my male colleagues about being questioned by my students more or getting less support. And a lot of time they will be like, maybe it's just you being sensitive. And they will throw out examples of really successful female scientists who have done both, who have raised kids successfully and have a career, as if I should have done that. It was me that failed at the test. It's not the system. So that got me very upset. I just want them to really, without sounding new, I just want them to acknowledge the fact, and then it's not a level play field, that we should work together to bring it to give us the equal footings. And then for males who are in the committee, they have the unique power of elevating us. So I want so with that, I think as Dr. Goda and Dr. Lee has said, the numbers are getting better, and then we are inching closer to gender equality, but we are far from there, and we need to work together to get there. So that's all I want to talk to you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Xu. I think that's a very interesting point you made. I think Ben Barris, famous transgender neurobiologist, also shared a similar comment that he felt it different when he was female, and the difference as a female and a male, and how people treat him. Now I will introduce our next speaker, Professor Linda Gu. She's from the School of Biomedical Sciences at the Chinese University of Hong Kong. Please, Linda.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Can you all hear me clearly? Okay, great. So my name is Linda Gu. I'm an assistant professor from School of Biomedical Sciences, the Chinese University of Hong Kong. I'm actually from the same school as Jacque. Actually, he invited me to join this webinar. I'm very honored and excited to have this opportunity today and share some of my thoughts on this topic. So my background is in medical genetics. I'm a trained clinical laboratory geneticist and certified by the American Board of Medical Genetics and Genomics. So in the United States, whenever it comes to genetic testing, the lab needs to be certified, the technologists need to be certified, and the lab directors who manage the lab, analyze the data, and sign out the reports also require certification. So my training was in the role of lab directors. After accomplishing the training and the certification, I came back to my home school and started my own lab, focusing on inheritable diseases. So particularly, we are studying a type of neurodegenerative diseases called hereditary spastic paraplegia. So this patient would have germline mutations, meaning that all of the cells in their bodies would carry the same pathogenic genetic changes. However, somehow only a specific type of neurons, namely the upper motor neurons, demonstrate degeneration, while all other neuron types or other cell types seem to be spared. So one of our research goals is to figure out the underlying reason. We are also studying the disease-causing mechanism of a recently discovered syndromic neurodevelopmental genetic disorder. So I guess I'm a newbie in the brain research field, and I have so much to learn from you guys. And I guess my sharing today would be my academic career experience in general. So for myself, I actually went through 3 phases. Phase 1 was when I was young, really young. Well, after 2 months when I was born, my parents were busy working, so they sent me to my grandparents. As some traditional Chinese parents and grandparents, my grandparents prefer boys over girls, so they devoted much more to my cousin. So back then, I had this principle in mind that I could lose to a girl, but never to a boy. It was a little bit too competitive and extreme, I know. And then there was phase 2 to me when I started to learn biology in secondary school, especially when I really learned biology in college. That's when it hit me. There is no gender equality, at least not under the current technology. The differences are genetically encoded, and we barely understand them. The females are destined to have the responsibility to carry the babies, and everything else is subsequently determined and influenced by this. So unless someday technology is so advanced that we could use artificial uterus to create babies that are equivalent to naturally born ones, genetically and epigenetically equivalent ones, well, for everyone here, we know how difficult and hard to reach this goal is. And then at that time, we may be able to begin to experience some gender equality. So I guess phase 2 to me was a dark period. So just straight up frustrating. The more biology and genetics I learned, the more I realized how unfair the situation is. I actually had an interesting observation in college. So when I looked at female students around me, some of them were close friends of mine, so I knew their goals and ambitions very well. So for female students majored in like social science, arts, or business, particularly in business, they were fearless. They were so ambitious. They believed 100% in themselves that they were going to conquer the world after graduation and become the top and get higher positions than their classmates. Well, male classmates included, of course. Well, for a business school at CU, for example, with 70% female students, this goal seemed reasonable and practical, right? And then in contrast, I saw my fellow female students majored in science, particularly in biology-related subjects. We seemed much more relaxed. I didn't hear anyone ever said, hey, I'm the best, I'll be the best, I'll beat the guys. But didn't mean we worked less as hard as they did or we had smaller goals in life. Of course not. So I guess my conclusion or observation was simply because we were biologists and we knew better in the subject, we have different attitudes towards these matters. And then I entered my phase 3 after I started my postdoc training in the more specialized medical genetics field. So maybe because I became older and started to gain deeper perspective, I gradually realized this didn't happen overnight. Actually, it was a process. I realized that I don't need to be obsessed with this issue. Instead, I should be embracing the differences, the inequality, the disparity, and direct them towards our ways. So yes, we are different, but it could absolutely be advantageous. So for example, I think we pay closer attention to details. So during my training in analyzing genetic data and drafting reports, I do feel I was able to correct more mistakes than my male colleagues. This is a particular important quality to have in diagnostic labs, as zero mistake is tolerant here, especially for prenatal cases, since one tiny mistake may determine life and death. As a matter of fact, there are more female clinical geneticists out there, especially for cytogeneticists. Another example, I do feel females are maybe better communicators sometimes. So for professions like genetic counselors, which by the way, nowadays are in huge demand because there are just so many genetic testing being done, they are occupied predominantly by females. So even for my current position, sometimes some of my male colleagues would ask me to talk to their potential candidates to join their labs just to get to know their trainees better. Okay, and last but not least, well, in my mind, this probably is the only thing as females hold more in power. As the gender that gives birth to babies, mothers would be 100% certain on the maternity of their babies. While for guys, on the other hand, well, they should thank modern technologies on paternity testing. Otherwise, they would never know for sure, right? Okay, so this is just a little joke here. Hope I didn't offend anyone. Okay, so I guess what I'm trying to say is we are different. So no need to conceal or avoid that. Let's face the reality, embrace it, and truly accept it. So what should we do, or what I can do to make the situation better? Well, I guess to me, it would be the encouragement. I am constantly inspired by senior female scientists, nearby or distant, who seem to have it all, career and family. So if they can do it, why couldn't I? And I try to encourage my girlfriends and my female trainees to believe in yourself, don't be intimidated, and you could have it all. I guess it is hard. It is especially difficult for us, but with the encouragement in mind, I guess we could reach higher. And most importantly, if you are truly fighting for gender equality, not just gender equity, then please devote to science, devote to technology, make that artificial uterus thing happen. And then at that time, us females could finally be completely liberated. Okay, that's all for my sharing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Gu. That was actually, I enjoyed your joke, and it was very interesting hearing about the differences between female students in business world and in science. Q&A. Okay, now it's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, a fellow Malaysian, okay, Dr. Pike Cheah. She is a senior lecturer at the Department of Human Anatomy at the University Putra, Malaysia. So because of her potential issues with internet connections, I think we're going to show a video. But Dr. Cheah is going to be online for questions and answers later if people have questions for her. Okay, so I think we will play her video.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Here is Pike Cheah from Malaysia. To begin with, I'm glad to share with you my career path in neuroscience, from an undergraduate student to postgraduate to becoming a principal investigator. I considered myself lucky enough to meet a couple of amazing female mentors who have shaped my career in neuroscience. Professor Rosita Rosley introduced me to the world of molecular genetics during my undergraduate final year project. Following that, Professor Asian Abdulatif was a great teacher who has guided me through the world of neuroanatomy. Subsequently, the postdoctoral training in 2 labs with lady mentors have helped me to the next level of neuroscience research. Meeting Dr. Hayley Ramshaw from Australia and Professor Sandra Brakefield from the United States was important in my research career. Both of them gave me opportunity to grow and to widen the research horizon. All the female mentors that I've met, they are brilliant and intelligent female scientists. All of them have shared some hallmark characteristics as a great mentor. They are caring, patient, and most of all, they are great listeners. Thanks to their amazing leadership and mentorship, they have inspired me to want to spend my life learning more about neuroscience and trying to find treatments for neurological diseases. Currently, I'm leading the Neurobiology and Genetics group in the University Putra, Malaysia. Our group is focusing on research on neurodevelopmental disorders and gene therapy targeting neurological diseases. While myself was groomed by many female mentors, I find it deeply discouraging that this message stated that avoid a female mentor or your career will suffer was actually concluded from the paper published in Nature Communications last year. This paper concluded that current diversity policies promoting female mentorships, as well intended as they may be, could hinder the careers of women. This article is seriously methodologically flawed and with the potential to inflict serious harm on the global scientific community, in which it did. Thanks to the ALBA network for taking the right steps and measures, asking the journal to retract the paper and publish an official apology to the research community. This paper is just one of the 1,000 examples that diminishes the value of women scientists. There's still a serious matter in gender inequality, gender bias, and science-gender gap in research community. A closer look into the STEM education and career. Unfortunately, more women are dropping out of STEM careers due to various factors. Hence, there's a huge calling for all women to strive and make a difference by contributing their expertise in science. Here, I would like to share with you some statistics from Malaysia based on the Bursa Malaysia 2015. Women participation in leadership, decision-making role has an increasing trend, but still considered low. Besides that, in Malaysia, this figure summarizes the women empowerment in economic participation and opportunity in my country. The labor force participation rate of women is still far below than the men. When you look at the estimated earned income, female is earning less money than male. And there's only a quarter of total legislators, senior officers, and managers were women. More devastating, the percentage of women as professional and technical workers were less than men. We strongly believe that diversity is the key to economic development, scientific excellence, and advancement. Women must be accepted as equal partners and drivers of nation's growth. Here, I would like to share with you a 12 Malaysian plan, which actually is a set of detailed strategy aimed to have a shared prosperity among Malaysia. And looking deeper into the 12 Malaysian plan, there is an indication that Malaysia government is making progress in female labor inclusion. The 12 Malaysian plan have included a few key agendas to support women. First of all, there's an effort to increase the labor force participation rate of women with skilled qualification currently outside of labor force. There's an aim to achieve up to 59% of women participation in the labor market by 2025. And there's an effort to create an enabling environment for women in middle management to ascend to top management. There's also an aim to increase women in top management positions in the private sector up to 30%. Malaysian government also encourage more employers to hire women after career breaks. And there's also strategy to change from current single peak trend to double peak of women's labor force participation rate. Besides the 12 Malaysia plan, there's also a Malaysia Women Policy, MWP, to ensure and to increase the awareness of gender equality in Malaysia. The Malaysia Women Policies concluded a few key words such as economy empowerment to close the gender gap in Malaysia workforce. It aims to promote dignity and welfare of women and to encourage gender equality in Malaysia workforce. There's also strategy to enhance women participation in decision-making at all levels. And most important, to ensure both genders share resources and opportunities in participation. Ladies and gentlemen, push for gender balance goes on. Every year, there's a couple of activities to encourage students, especially girls, to be involved in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics career. This year, in conjunction with the National Science Week Malaysia and International Women's Day, together with other female scientists, we have delivered a series of talks at the Women in Science event to spark the interest among female students, with the hope that they are not tracked away from science throughout their education. That's the strategy that I would like to share of the effort in national level in Malaysia. How about in the international levels? I'm glad that I have an opportunity to involve in some global association in which I have learned what are the paths towards tackling this issue. As a member of ISN, International Society for Neurochemistry, I was involved in CAEN, in which this committee pursues several initiatives intended to stimulate neurochemistry research. And one of the funding that it offers is a career interruption re-entry grant, with the aim to support the return to an active research career of researchers who have experienced significant career interruptions as a result of childbirth. And currently serving as the IBRO-Asia-Pacific Regional Committee Chair. Together with our committee members, we ensure that we support the neuroscience activities in Asia-Pacific region that incorporated the core values of IBRO, including diversity and inclusiveness. With IBRO, we offer a few grants to support the female scientists, such as Young IBRO Maternity Parenthood Grant, in which we acknowledge pregnancy, maternity leave, adoption leave, and child primary caregiving affect researchers' continuity in scientific research. Besides that, we also offer IBRO Diversity Grant with the intention to support events that promotes regional and gender diversity in neuroscience. In conclusion, I'm glad to see there's increasing awareness of gender equality at the national and international levels. Here, I would like to invite the female scientists to take up the challenge bias and act for equality, reach out and step forward together. The world needs science and science needs women. For that, I thank you for your attention and I'm ready for questions from the audience. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Cheah. That was very interesting. And also it's very nice to see some information. And hopefully the attendees will, contact you further with more information, ask you questions also after the during the Q&A. Okay, so now it's my pleasure to introduce our final speaker, Professor Gail Tripp. She's a professor at the Human Developmental Neurobiology Research Unit in Okinawa at the Okinawa Institute of Science and Technology. Professor Tripp.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity to be part of this network. So my job this evening is to, or this morning for some of you, is to try to pull together the ways in which we might go forward to improve the situation for women neuroscientists, or those interested in becoming neuroscientists. So yes, I'm a professor at the Okinawa Institute of Science and Technology. I'm also Vice President for University Community Services. So I am dealing quite a lot with issues of diversity and gender. I trained as a clinical psychologist and completed a PhD in neuroscience at the University of Otago more years ago than I'm willing to admit out loud. And my research now is on the nature and causes of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, particularly altered reinforcement mechanisms, and it draws on my combined training backgrounds. It's been really exciting to hear of the positive changes that are happening, and I think it's very, very important that we acknowledge those changes. There's obviously a lot more work to be done, but there are things happening, and I think it's very, very important that we acknowledge that and work to keep that momentum. In listening to the speakers, I've tried to put together what are the areas that have been raised. And I'm going to go through these and offer up some suggestions, I hope, some things that have already been spoken about and some additional suggestions. So we've heard about the importance of female representation, about encouragement, about recruiting women, about supporting women once they've been recruited, the importance of educating our colleagues, our female colleagues and our male colleagues, the importance of the kind of open discussions that have been had today so far, and the importance of our own engagement and our own responsibilities for trying to enhance the situation for women. In terms of representation, it was suggested that possibly we should include quotas for conferences, for committee work, for faculty, or at least have incentives to promote the number of women who are engaging in these positions. A really important point was raised about the fact that there are fewer women in brain sciences, which means there are more pressures put on those small number of women to be on the committees. So I think that we need to be sure that in requesting women to take on these roles, that the organisations that are asking them to do so recognise and support and promote those additional activities. In terms of encouragement, this is a particular issue for me. I grew up in a small town in New Zealand. I come from a non-science, non-academic family, and so I'm aware that the path to a career in neurosciences, in my case, is probably somewhat accidental, but supported along the way by many people who believed in me. So I think that early and continued encouragement to pursue and remain with science is incredibly important. We've heard from several of the panelists today that it can be okay for some of the journey, but there are roadblocks. And sometimes those roadblocks are families. Sometimes women are put in the position of deciding, is it career or family? And it saddens me to say that that is often a question I'm asked here in Japan. Is it possible to have a career and a family? And I always tell them that it is, that I have both. But in order to do so, you need a supportive partner. And so it is something that, you know, we talk about, that it is a possibility, but they say it takes a family to, it takes a village to raise a family. And I think that that is one of the things that we need to be thinking about. How do we support women who make a decision to have a family? But so we need early and continued encouragement. And one of the things I've become very aware of in Japan is early is very important. One of the things that I've come to learn from my Japanese colleagues is that in elementary school, boys and girls are treated very similarly, but when they get into middle school, if the girls are good at languages, they get encouraged into languages and away from science. So we need to encourage them. We need to educate their teachers, encourage them to keep going through middle school, through high school, as undergraduates, graduates and beyond. So we don't stop needing to be encouraged. And I think we need to start it early and we need to keep it going. We've also heard about the importance of role models. And I think we need role models at all levels, not just very, very high level experienced and successful women, but we also need the role model who we think we can reach. So I think role models are very important. I think we need to recognize and celebrate ability. And that was something that Dr. Gu was talking about. It took her a long time to realize that she was good, she was successful, and she could do it. So I think we need to be thinking about grants and scholarships at all levels. But I think an important point here is that we need to help women identify what's available, help them prepare the applications, and make sure they submit them. Because one of the things that we do know about female students, postdocs, and faculty is that they're more likely to need encouragement to put the application in. They're more likely to question whether they meet the requirements for a position, for a grant, for a scholarship, and they may hesitate. Their male colleagues don't hesitate. They have the confidence, and so we need to make sure that we support them and assist them in those ways. We need to tap women on the shoulder. You know, I think that men are, and this is a gross generalization, but men tend to be a little bit more willing to give it a go. Women tend to only put in an application if they know that they really meet the criteria. So we need to tap them on the shoulder. We need to encourage them. Some working examples I wanted to give you to show you that it can happen. We now have Science Fridays in our Child Development Centre here at OIST and in our school age program. So we're encouraging the children from the age of 2 to get interested in science. We have sponsored talks at local schools. We have a high sci program to encourage local high school students in science. We have female students going out mentoring young high school students. And we have a science challenge where we bring students from different parts of Japan together. And one of the sessions that we have in the science challenge is a session on the importance of gender equality in science. And I tell you, the young men who join this program are very engaged. They're very, very interested in participating. They get it. So we should be educating them. Recruitment, I'm not going to talk about a lot because I know that there is a lot written about this and I know I've got limited time, but we need to make sure that women feel welcome to apply. The language that we use in our advertisements, the way we phrase things, encourages people or discourages people. We need family-friendly and diversity-friendly advertisements so people feel comfortable and supported. And we need to pay attention to subject pools. We heard before about quotas, but should we halt searches if there are no women in the search? You know, we need to think about these things. We need to be careful about our review of applications. We need diversity officers. We need to train people well when they go into these committees. We need to ensure a diverse review panel so that we can appreciate all the people that are applying. We also need to remember that as women, we are just as capable of being biased as men, and we have to sometimes attend to that. We need to think about whether we can introduce blind review processes for grants, because we've heard that in Korea in particular, there has been historically, improving now, a bias against women. Can we do initial screens without knowing the gender of our applicants for grants and for positions? We also need to check that the people we hire are on our side in terms of increasing diversity. So one of the things that we always ask about in our recruitment is, you know, how do you go about establishing diversity? How do you support diversity? We ask our applicants because if we want to, we have to build capacity to support diversity. There's more I could say, but one important thing is dual career support. Many women scientists have partners who are also scientists. So this is something that universities, departments, organizations can do, is support the dual career couple, because we often get two great people when we make that a possibility. Support, there are lots of ways in which we need the individual, institutional and national support. We do need dedicated staff in departments to pursue and push for gender equality and diversity, but we also need that support to be dispersed throughout our organisations. It's not enough for it to just reside in the diversity office. It's got to be something that we try to make sure exists throughout the organisation. Family-friendly work environment, I think, is very important. Now, I say this, not all women choose to have children, and we should respect that. But for women who do have children, it is an interruption to career. So we need things like on-site childcare. We need subsidised and affordable childcare. We need simple things like a woman's room so that a woman can express milk or breastfeed. We need to have change tables. And even if they don't get used all that much, Just the fact that we actually advertise in our institutions that we support a family-friendly environment sends out a very important message. Stop the clock policies so that women are not disadvantaged. We have an interesting stop the clock policy here at OIST. It applies to men and women for two reasons. One, we want fathers to be involved in their children's lives, but we also don't want using the stop the clock policy to be something that is held against women. So by making it available to both genders, it doesn't become something that it's a woman only issue. How am I going for time, Jacque? I forgot to look at the clock when I started.
Yeah, I think we have some time for Q&A. We're a little bit over time right now, but I think you can finish.
I'll just wrap up. So support, mentoring, we've heard over and over again. Equitable and appropriate administrative and teaching loads is just something I'd really like to encourage. We've heard that women often get put on very many committees. That is something that we need to address, either through providing additional support to them, providing them support in their labs, recognising it. Women often end up with administrative work that is high demand, but low value. It's low value, not that it's low value work, but it may not be valued. Women get put into pastoral care quite often, which is a very high workload, but it doesn't show up. Financial support, we've heard a lot about the importance of grants. And we need to be looking at how we educate within our universities and our organisations. Education about diversity and gender needs to be ongoing, it needs to be accessible, and it needs to be positive and professional. It needs to be at all levels of the organisation. We need to focus on women's strengths. We've heard about the importance of acknowledging that we're different, but different isn't less. Different is complementary. And I think finally, as has happened today, we need to have open discussion and acknowledgement of the problems. Unless we admit to the problem, there will be no change. So we should not be embarrassed if our organisation doesn't have something in place. We should talk about it and think about the ways in which we can actually create what is needed. So we have to acknowledge historical problems. We shouldn't be embarrassed by our failures. We should learn from our failures and make change. And I think it's all about educate, discuss, challenge, encourage, support, and repeat those steps over and over again. So thank you very much for the opportunity to just say some of the things that I think are happening, but we need to keep making sure continue to keep happening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Tripp. This is a wonderful summary, including all the possible solutions for the current situation. And I just want to emphasize how much I agree with all the panelists and your points in terms of the issues. And I think the first step is to admit the problems, as you said. And this is really important. And we need to bring it to the higher management at the university and also ideally at the government level, the policymaker level. Okay. Government level, the policymaker level. Okay. Then I think we can now move on to the Q&A sessions, and we have our first questions. To what extent male scientists in your countries are committed to improve the lack of gender balance? I think this is a very important question. And Dr. Xu made a comment, and she thinks that many male scientists are willing to and actively doing so, but it just takes time to undo the damages that has been done and to level the play field. And I totally agree with Dr. Xu's point. And as a male and a husband, my wife and I are also expecting a baby, and now we're in active discussion how we are going to share the responsibility. I think that's the minimal I can do as a male, because I cannot carry a child and she has to take time off, and I can continue to do what I've been doing. Sometimes I feel bad about it, but through discussion, I think we are making some consensus, and hopefully the university will provide some childcare help as well, as Professor Tripp mentioned. However, right now there's not so much childcare help in Hong Kong, and I really hope that it will happen one day. Then, okay, and the next question is, thank you for the outstanding presentations. To what extent do you think the policymakers can impact measures on gender parity in STEMs in your country? So, is there any of these panelists would like to give a go and try to answer these questions? Professor Tripp, do you want to share your thinking on this? Like how to what extent you think policymakers can impact measures on gender parity in STEMs?
I think here in Japan, I would say that I have seen changes. I've been in Japan for 14 years now, having been somewhat hesitant to come to Japan because of concerns about gender equality. I mean, we've seen in Japan that there have been movement by the government to try to encourage up to 30% of senior management leadership roles to be held by women. I'm not sure that we've got there yet, but it's an important incentive. We've not so much with gender, but we're also seeing changes in the labour laws regarding diversity and disability. So there are steps being taken. I think we still have some way to go, but I am seeing positive change in terms of just not next week, but the week after, I'm giving a presentation to Osaka University about steps that can be taken in recruitment in order to encourage more women. So that is encouraging to me that they are reaching out. I'm going to be giving a talk. And so I think that there are steps. That's at the university level, but it's still a change in terms of what has been happening. So I think that there's awareness, but I think that sometimes we need to actually demonstrate the how. I think the willingness is there, but the how is still something that I think support is needed for. And that is why organisations like this one are so important, in order to provide clear guidelines and maybe clear strategies for how the changes can be made.
Thank you. Yeah, I totally agree. I think policymakers has a huge role in shaping the policies and guidelines. Okay.
And Jacque, may I add on to Professor Tripp's comments?
Of course.
So I would like to share on the Malaysian perspective. So actually recently by our Ministry of Higher Education Malaysia, so for any science application for funding, there's a special column to allow the scientists, especially female scientists, that you can highlight when you're proposing a proposal. So is this supporting of any special policies in Malaysia? And most of the time, if you can mention about is a female, is a woman policy that I shared just now during my presentation. So that will give you a bonus for that, because you have intention to promote science in and with to highlight the importance of female scientists or those who involved in the STEM education. So I think that this is a good strategy. They are giving an opportunity to help the female scientists to increase the chance for their proposal to be funded. So I think this is a good measures that is taken by the Malaysian government. Thank you.
Thank you, Pike. Thank you. So the next question is to Professor Lee from KAIS. Is the situation women getting grants getting any better in Korea?
I think it's slowly getting better, especially when the team grant is supported by the government. The government increased to have the female member as a collaborator or colleague in the team. But it's still harder for a woman scientist to get a big grant as a leader of the grant. So it is still need to be more encouragement and better in the evaluation, especially for the big grant.
Thank you, Professor Lee. We really hope that the situation in Korea will improve in soon future. Our next question, could the stop the clock policy be elaborated upon?
I think that was one of the policies that I mentioned. Here at OIST, we have a stop the clock policy for individuals who give birth or adopt a child. And this allows an extra year of time before somebody goes up for a tenure evaluation. So it's understood that scientists don't actually stop working, but that if you have a child, it is going to impact the amount of work that you can actually do. So at OIST, a faculty member can stop the clock up to twice for 2 pregnancies or 2 adoptions, which means that they continue to have the support of the university for 1 or 2 extra years before they come up for a tenure evaluation. So it just gives the individual a little bit more time to make sure that they have their portfolio ready to go up for tenure evaluation. And as I said before, here that stop the clock applies to both male and female faculty members who have a new child in the family.
Thank you, Professor Tripp, for elaborating on this policy. Okay, our next question is, many panelists have mentioned the impact of culture on existing inequalities. How could a culture shift be accomplished in order to change mentalities towards women in science? Any of the panelists would like to answer this question?
I think it's difficult to engineer a culture shift, but I'm curious about what will happen, say, in 10 or 20 years with the single child policy in China. Because before, people definitely value male more, but now because they're more, you can only have 1 child. So female are treated definitely more and more equal as male. So I guess we just have to wait and see how that would, what kind of changes they'll bring about the gender equality in the future. That's my thoughts on it.
I guess if I could add, maybe you know, you touched on earlier, you know, teaching kids early, young, right? So to understand that they don't have to be pigeonholed into their gender. And I talk, for example, going to a toy shop where they had, for example, the girls' toys were all dolls and pink colored, and the boys' toys were, you know, robots and so on, and blue colored. And I was, well, this was just a few weeks ago. I was like, wow. So, you know, these kind of things already, right? You're already starting to give this message to kids. And as a father of an 11-year-old, you know, I want her to know, as well, even a girl, that, you know, it's, you know, go and play rugby. I wanted to, and go, you know, and luckily she likes maths and science, but it's up to her, but not to feel like she has to go into just the arts because she feels she's not good in science, or vice versa, you know. But and I guess then also having, as it was mentioned, that interesting stat by, I think, Professor Goda, the parity in Japan. I guess having people, you know, also more females in positions of power coming in, because then they can also have more influence, right? I guess these are all interrelated, I would say.
I think one thing I would also say is that it's hard to predict how quickly change will come about. I mean, if you look at the history of like gender identity, if you go back 40 years, everything was about how do you change the person? And we've come such a very long way in understanding and acceptance of things like, you know, gender diversity, that I'm really very hopeful that the rate of change of people's understanding and perception of gender and gender roles is changing very, very quickly.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing the ideas. And we have one more question. It seems that from my perspective, sometimes a system such as an election system or job searching market is lack of willingness to offer women a chance. How could we encourage more opportunities for women when the overall environment is lack of willingness? So Dr. Xu replied in the type session. She agreed with Dr. Goda's quota solution. This is not unique to female, but it's also true for all minorities. Women being part of it. To start, a quota system is the way to go, she thinks. Does the panelists have any other perspective for this question about the overall environment is lack of willingness to give a woman a chance?
Just quickly to add, so I really promoted the having like a goal numbers, to aim, and also in some sense I feel from some of my male colleagues that it's okay as long as they meet the numbers, but they don't realize what was the, you know, the reason that we had the numbers to begin with. And so it's like still, you know, working, not just setting the quotas, but then by introducing more women and then making the environment more comfortable, where the you could really capitalize on having all that women represented. And I think it's sort of like a double standard in a way, or two-tiered, you know, obstacle that we have to have. So first we have to achieve those numbers, but at the same time, I think it's the mindset that I think all of us could work. Yep. And I really echo some of the things raised, that we have to start early and changing. And it's a bit of a chicken and an egg. Having the diversity would really help in having the social, you know, cultural mentality, and not just gender, but you know, different nationalities, you know, having, you know, different viewpoints all in the same place. I think that really helps.
Thank you, Dr. Goda. Okay, we have another question from Professor Mary Wei. She asked if one trend that is worrying is that women often were asked to work in a more supportive role, for example, in writing grants or papers or guiding students, research assistants, so that the senior scientists get most of the credits, while the women scientists were left with a lesser rank at the end. Does any panelist have any thoughts on this comment about playing a more supportive role so that other senior scientists may get most of the credits?
I think that happens quite often. I'm sorry. I think that happens quite often in many cases, like especially for the big grant. Female scientists are working as a collaborator or the cooperator of the research team, and the senior scientist is the one who is leading the team, right? So that is I think it gets better and better. I think the leadership as a female scientist is important in every cases. So if the female scientist can lead the team with the support of the senior male faculty, I think that would be great. But for that to have that happen, it is really important for the senior male faculties realize that and support the young female scientists in the field.
Thank you, Professor Lee. Any other thoughts? Okay.
I would like to supplement Professor Lee on the more junior level. I guess what we can do is to encourage our female trainees to have higher goals. I think a lot of them, we nowadays see more female graduate students. I think it's not just in our school, I think it's everywhere in the world. But how come I know we see more and more junior faculty, female junior faculties, but it's not proportional, and at least not at this point. I guess the junior trainees needs more encouragement to have higher goals. Some of them may not have this high enough goal in their mind that they could do this, but I guess we could encourage them and let them know they could do roles not just for supportive, but could be in the leadership level. I think that's what we can do from the fundamental at the beginning.
And I'd just like to add that I think that things that as institutions we can do are look at how we establish promotion criteria, how we establish criteria for grants in terms of what it is we consider to be important. We know from the research, for example, that women tend to be judged on what they've achieved and men tend to be judged for their potential. And women do that and men do that when they look at CVs, when they interview candidates. And so I think if we can actually become more objective and establish ahead of time the criteria that we're going to use to make judgments, then we're much more likely to stick to those criteria rather than be influenced by these other variables. So I think that actually getting us to set the criteria and actually use those criteria, I think that's going to be to women's advantage because they will be evaluated more positively. But I think we also need to think about what are the criteria, what do we give people credit for? And we tend to give them credit for high impact papers. We don't necessarily give them credit for being a wonderful mentor. And I think we need to perhaps look at what it is we value when we're looking at promotion and things like that.
I just want to share a story about one of my friends. Like, she is a junior faculty and her husband is actually, doing really well in neuroscience, a senior faculty. So when she started her lab, the advice she got from her chairman is that do not collaborate with your husband. It's about that if she ever collaborated, she would not get any of the credit. So I think, that side of that question that women need to be aware of, and then it becomes a choice that, you may be treated unfairly in that sense if you're collaborating, and then the credits will be assigned to that senior male scientist. And that's just like, people's perception in a way. I think to be aware of that bias, at least then you can choose one way or another. So she chose not to collaborate and, had her own paper. It took longer, but she got her own credit. So that's also one strategy, I would say.
Thank you, Dr. Xu, sharing the point. Okay, our next question is actually for us, me and Dipesh. So to the two male panelists here, how can men be better allies? So Dipesh, you have anything to share?
Sure. Well, there's a lot of things. I guess being, involved in this sort of societies or committees, right? And being aware of that there's still issues and what the issues are in terms of equality between male and females in, well, sort of in the science world, but generally in the community in general. So, there's a lot of things we discussed today, and being aware of these issues and more. And I guess a couple of things would be, as I mentioned, getting, public outreach, getting to kids, maybe talking to them about our work, but also things related with our work, and promoting science to girls and boys. Maybe also teaching girls that you can science is cool, and there's all these things that they can get involved with, but also teaching, I guess, boys that it's all that women are also that there is great women scientists, and science is teaching boys that it's not just a guy's thing. That would be one thing. And I guess being aware of these issues, and then getting involved in your universities or in your community, right, to push for these changes. Really, I mean, that's the very broad sort of answer, I would say.
Yeah, thank you, Dipesh. I agree with your points, and I think this is a very intricate and difficult questions as well, as how can we help as a male. I often discuss this with my wife, Haley. She's also here as an attendee today. At the beginning, I feel that it's very difficult. I feel like, how can I help? I'm not sure how, because sometimes I feel like I'm the bad guy. I'm the bad guy here. So what can I do? But she actually encouraged me to play an active role in ALBA network, because we can together we can support each other to try to improve the situation. And first of all, we have to admit the problems or acknowledge the issues, and as you said, raise awareness to the public. And I'm sure many other people are not aware of the situation, and then our role is that we can raise awareness. So I try to reach out to the university management. I try to promote the event to our diversity and inclusion office. I try to encourage my lab members to attend. I try to encourage our female lab staff to think about these questions and these issues, and I try to discuss this with them. So this is something I can do as a PI or as an assistant professor. And I also value female mentorship and leadership. Like my PhD supervisor females, and many senior members are female. I learned a lot from them. I think is to create an environment from this generation on that we pass on this new type of thinking or mentality to the next generation. I think that will be my perspective, is to offer this perspective to the next generation. Okay, and our last question is, do you have tips to raise awareness about the fact that we're all biased? I think this is a difficult question. So any of the panelists want to try to answer that?
So I just want to, share our incidents. We are all capable of bias. So one day, one of my female students come in and said, like, she thinks she's doing well. Why I haven't given her A? One of the reasons would be like, she's so quiet. I systematically overlooked at her. And, I had like conversations with many of my female students, and make me realize I too has been, perpetuating the bias, because they were being quiet. They're not they're not making troubles for me. So I'm not, paying as enough attention to. So to just keep on talking, to, reaching out, to discuss. And so for them to come in, make me realize my own bias. And then, for me to realize I'm being discriminated, I want to reach out. So I think it's just to open up the conversation, to keep on communicating would be the way to raise awareness for others. And for me, I'm sure I don't, being a female, I'm not intentionally, but nevertheless, I was doing that. So for other people to confront me and to make me realize it, I think that's a way to raise awareness for everyone, to just keep on talking it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think keep talking about the issues, discussing with like every level at the university or at the society. I think that will help us to create that environment. Any other things to add from the panelists?
Just in terms of the bias, of course, there's quite a lot available in the literature and on the internet now about unconscious bias training. And I always take the unconscious bias training tests, and even though I know what they're testing, I can't beat them. So no matter what, the bias is there, it's in all of us. And I don't think we have to be ashamed of the bias. I think we have to be aware of the bias. And so sometimes we can encourage our organizations to host unconscious bias training so that it's not the bias that's the problem. It's the lack of awareness of the bias, because if you know you're biased, you can compensate, as you've just described. So I think that at an institutional level, we might want to push our senior administrators and heads of department, for example, to see if we can actually host unconscious bias training so that more people have the opportunity to become aware.
Thank you. Is there anything to add from the panelists? Okay, if not, then I think we will close the session. Thank you for all of your insightful perspectives. I think we have a great discussion, and we are hoping that this is one of the first webinar discussing the region-specific issues. I think we have a very fruitful discussion, and I think the key take-home message today is to keep talking and raise the awareness. I think that will help us to continue our fight to this diversity and inclusion. Thank you for the audience for attending this event. And please, if you haven't joined the ALBA network, please try to sign up and join us and participate in our activities. I think that's all from me as the co-chair. Dipesh, do you have anything to add?
No, you did fantastically. Thank you everyone for the panelists, for your wonderful presentations, and the audience. And just to echo essentially what was said, it's good to talk, right? So we need to discuss and be aware. This just increases our awareness, right? So yeah, that's it. So, and please join the ALBA network, because this is we can, these are the ways we can move things and change, right? So that's it. Thank you.
Yeah, and the last thing I wanted is to thank the organizing team, Matilde and Lorianne. They play a big role in organizing this event to make this happen. And again, thank you for joining us today. Okay, bye-bye.
Thanks everyone, bye-bye.
Thank you guys
Stay
so much.
safe, everyone. See ya.